Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Hurd, and this is BUSA 6621 Executive Perspectives in Leadership. And thanks for joining us today. This is our podcast series on leadership, specifically executive leadership. And today's topic is so important because we're talking about leadership mastery and executive presence. And I don't know about you, but I hear that term executive presence a lot. And as someone who develops others, it's really interesting because people will come to me and say they need to polish their executive presence. And I then have to ask, well, what does that mean to you? And you're in for a treat because when I have to ask about what it is, I usually go to this person and ask him, what does it mean, Nate? What does that translate into? How do people behave? And so with us today is Nate Bennett. Welcome, Nate.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to be here. Thanks, Debbie.
I'm glad you're here on this podcast. It's good to hear your voice, and I know that you have so much to add. And I've got lots of questions for you around this kind of mastery and executive presence. But first, before I get into the questions, Nate, do you mind sharing with the students your background and what you do?
Absolutely. So I've been in, I say, corporate America for 30 years, and not to date myself, but I've been fortunate to have really a long career primarily working with people. I've grown up really on the talent side. I've worked in really two main industries, both retail, big box retail, and then also financial services with most of my career over the last 21 years or so, really focused on financial services. And my last 10, 11 years or so, I've been really on the diversity and inclusion practitioner side. I'm careful with those words given, kind of where we're at, but I'm an inclusion professional, a practitioner. And I'm very fortunate to have the role that I have and, really be in a role, really all of my career where I can give back and help people and really observe people and, kind of assess what's been really good, especially for leaders and, where leaders probably have gotten into trouble over the years. So, like I said, I'm happy to be here, excited about the conversation.
I'm glad you're here too. I think also when I think about you, you tend to practice what you preach. You absolutely have been able to grow and be stronger when it comes to your particular leadership kind of presence and more. And then you help others, like help them with theirs as well. Because what I've seen is some leaders tend to plateau because they rely on past success rather than intentionally evolving their own presence. They kind of get stuck with what's worked and they don't move that forward, especially as they get promoted or they get into different roles. And sometimes that shows up as inconsistent leadership. And they struggle to kind of translate their presence into a new role or have real influence across the organization when they used to, and now they don't. And I've seen you just wonderfully help those leaders get through that kind of phase. So let's talk about you first, if you don't mind.
Sure.
How have you intentionally cultivated your leadership presence? How have you done that? Because you absolutely have it. I've seen it.
Yeah, that's a good loaded question, Debbie. And I'm glad, when we talk about mastery, and you said it early as a part of the question in terms of evolution, because mastery is a tough word. I think you can get really good at it and you can get better at it, mastering it, because we're always constantly evolving. Even today, almost 30 years into my career, I always say I'm still learning. And it's part of kind of the mindset that I've adopted around really a growth mindset. But when I think about really the journey in terms of, what I've learned, it's a segment of, my youth, being very young and being, when you're young, people leave a lot of impressions on you, both positively and negatively. And then also, what's been comfortable for me, because a part of leadership is authenticity, and part of being authentic is leading and being you in a way that is really you. And oftentimes you can really tell and see when a leader is not acting authentically because it's not generally who they are. And that sometimes is where individuals get in trouble. But I'll go back a little bit, and sorry, I've kind of had to set the stage a little bit because it's a lot of things in my youth have stuck with me. A big role model for me was my father and my dad, and in terms of he really taught me consistency and also just showing up and also just presence as well. He spent 22 years in the military in the Air Force. He was enlisted, and when he retired, he was a master sergeant, and then spent the next 20 plus years in his second career. So he really only had two jobs in his life or two careers, and his second career was working in management and hospital administration in his second career. But his consistency as it relates to just getting up every morning, Monday through Friday, getting dressed, shirt always pressed and ironed with a tie and his briefcase, kind of as a young kid was very impressionable. So I wanted to be, I would always try to imitate that in terms of everything that I did, whether it's school, whether it's athletics, in terms of just being very consistent. And, what I always tell people, and especially for leaders, because it's part of that process is you kind of have to fall in love with the mundane. You have to fall in love with the boring, or else you start to get a little bit ahead of your skis a little bit, especially as a leader. And where that kind of translates or makes from a connection perspective is how people see you every day, especially as you lead, whether it's a small team or a large team, is critically important. And it's, because it sets the stage in terms of how they need to deal with you, how they have a conversation, what creates the space of comfortable, being very comfortable for them to be able to share and be very transparent with how they're thinking, has a lot to do with your consistency around your behavior. So early on, my father kind of taught me that in a lot of ways.
I love that. And I've read over and over again that it's not these big triumphs or wins that will position you as a leader. It is that consistent dependability, that reliance that you're going to show up, and you're going to show up not the same, but in a solid way that says, I can count on this person. And I think that is so important as leaders. We're looking for the next big hill to climb, mountain to conquer, but it's really the consistency. That to me is that journey to mastery, that journey to executive presence. And you also touched on where I was going to next, and that's the practices that help you lead teams with confidence and authenticity. Because what I heard you say was when your team knows how you're going to show up consistently, they get it. They find you predictable and they find you competent. Okay. So anything else you want to add there about how you can lead teams with confidence and authenticity?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So there's one that is actually better for me, and we talk about it. We call it empathetic exploration, and that is just simply getting to know that particular person. It's not, in corporate America, it's not crossing over boundaries to learn everything it is about their personal life, but it's just about creating a relationship that is authentic to you and your team member, and it creates that safe space. And what I mean by that, for me, it's better for me to kind of explain to people, give them some personal information about myself, who are my mentors, how I grew up, people that are important to me in my life, because that's the way that I connect with individuals. And usually when I do that, I can see them as I understand. And when they start connecting with me, I start to understand, well, how might this individual on my team react if I called on them during a meeting to answer a question? What is their most comfortable way to communicate? Do they feel more comfortable in communicating kind of offline? Do they want to have a conversation? Are they comfortable with being put on the spot? Is that something that they really, really like? But just getting to know that individual helps eliminate any preconceived perceptions I may have about that individual, and the same vice versa, because it's just as important for me to get to know them, for them to get to know me. And you go through that empathetic exploration, you'd be amazed at what that creates in terms of from a performance on both sides, but really the performance that you're trying to drive from that individual. Now they start to see you as, well, this is just a regular person. They've had similar headwinds and similar tailwinds I've had as an individual, and we're more the same than we are different. And you'd be surprised in terms of just the safe environment that creates for the people you're leading at any particular time. But I would say that that's probably one of the number one things that's helped me.
Well, I think for the students listening, they would agree with me if I said you should teach our chapters on authentic leadership and servant leadership and a bit on the transformational side, because, Nate, some of the students have really thought it through, like, can I be that vulnerable? Can I share that? And I like how you named it empathetic exploration, because for some in this class, that's a new kind of way of leading. And when we think of executive presence, perhaps some in our class are thinking of the suit and the office and the trappings that go around being an executive. But what I heard you say, it's really about the empathy and the sharing and the vulnerability and meeting people where they are. So really interesting. Thank you. So your role has been changing. You talked about kind of your career journey, but lately it's also changed as you've moved or have been kind of acquired by another company and more. So I'm very curious, how do you continue developing your leadership skills as your role evolves?
Yeah, another good question. So Debbie's referring to, so I'm the Chief Inclusion Officer at the bank. And the work that we have done has evolved really over the last 50, 60 years. And a lot, as you would imagine, over the last year or so. And it's not, the thing that makes it challenging is that, my role deals a lot with people. And when you're dealing with people, you're dealing with from a psychological perspective and also from a sociological perspective. So you're dealing with how people behave and how humans behave. And you're also dealing with how they respond and react to external and internal pressures, whether it be job related or whether it be personal as well. And you're trying to really focus on, in my particular role, you're really trying to focus on how do you bring a group of employees or individuals together for a common cause, while at the same time having many different identities in terms of how they grew up and what they see as positive. But I would say that there are two things. So one is psychological safety and also trust in an environment. Those two things haven't changed regardless of what type of era we've been in. And it's really about treating people fairly, being mindful of decisions and being fair from a treatment perspective. And it goes back to the whole consistency conversation. And, so I really haven't had to change as long as I focus on those particular things in terms of being a consultant and helping the organization and our leaders how to create a safe space, how to build trust, and how to make effective and fair decisions across their organization. As long as I focus on those particular things, the things that are going on externally really don't necessarily have a huge impact on the work that I do, if that makes sense. And while it's been trying because a lot of those external pressures really impact really the mentality and how people and individuals respond to leaders in the organization and the assumptions that are sometimes being made as a part of that, that does make it a little bit challenging. But at the end of the day, I tell people all the time that, a big part of my job is just to, teach people to be nice and genuine and fair. And as long as you do those particular things, I'm making it a little bit more elementary than what it is. But as long as your mindset in terms of trying to create positive outcomes for the people that you lead and you manage, you can almost never go wrong. You're going to make mistakes sometimes, but as long as your heart and your mind are in the right place, you generally do make the right decisions as a leader.
Well said. And I think for those who are listening, you can now see why Nate is sought after when it comes to mastering leadership and executive presence. So for my last question, Nate, I'm thinking, like, the students are going to want to know a few things.
Sure.
And so one of the questions I want to pose to you is, how do they grow their presence over time? What does that look like versus those who plateau? Because many are taking this course hoping, for either deeper just enrichment, but many are also pursuing this course and the degree for better positions. So how would you distinguish maybe for them who this is how you need to kind of start thinking to grow versus plateauing? What do you see the differences in behaviors between those two different leaders? Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
yeah, it does. It does. So one is mindset, and I think that's where it starts. And you always have to have a growth mindset perspective on the fact that, and just accept you're always going to be growing and you're always going to be changing, you're always going to be learning. And that learning sometimes it doesn't always come from someone that has more experience than you. And if you think about, regardless of where you're at in your career, your kind of your age and generation, being intentional about learning from others that are either maybe in a different generation than you, I think is really important. That creates that mindset of, okay, I'm going to continue to grow. The other thing is that it's easy for humans to shy away from things that are hard. We always want to take the easy route, but if you adopt the mindset that, I'm going to get really good at the hard, the more difficult things. So that may be, dealing with conflict. That may be having hard and difficult conversations that are very direct and that need to be very transparent. And I want to say you never really get comfortable with those conversations, but you get better at how to deliver them. You get better at how to anticipate, how an individual may respond. And then the other thing I would say is, I grew up in sports, so we were always told that it's a decision as to whether or not you want to be poor, average, good, great, or elite. And it really starts with you, and it's a daily exercise you have to go through in your mind to say that, okay, I'm going to get up every day and get better and better. And that's that whole 1% better conversation. But I want to adopt an elite mindset. And that means that, I have to focus on consistency, getting better at the hard. Now, you're not going to be able to do that every day because that's just, you need to have a little bit more grace, give yourself a little bit more grace because it is, there is that stress, anxiety, you do get tired. But if you're consistent in terms of really trying to be intentional about those elite habits, a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a yearly basis, and then going back and assessing yourself, and not just yourself assessing, but reaching out to others to assess you, to create a greater awareness of, am I practicing those things that are elite? Then, those are the things that over time with consistency and with intentionality, that will eventually make you a really, really solid and great leader. But once again, as I said at the beginning, mastery is hard. You can get really good, but I mean, we're always learning. I'm always learning today. I'm learning from new leaders as we are now a part of a new company as well. I'm watching Debbie. I've learned from you all the time. I've been learning from you for the last 16 years. So, just being open to that, and like I said, adopting that mindset to be, not just good. Everybody can be good or average. That's easy to do, but the hard thing is to be elite.
I love that. And I love how you put it from the athletic point of view. You choose every day at what level you want to compete. And if you choose that level every day and act on it, it will happen. And I think for me too, Nate, that's the difference between plateauing and then evolving is choosing every day. I knew you would be great on this podcast. You have shared so many gems. And students, I hope that you listen and listen again to this podcast because there's so many places you can take this particular podcast as you go back and kind of recap what we've learned today. Nate, thank you. You've been fantastic. We appreciate your time.
Great. No, thank you, Debbie. I appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.